Come back, everybody. It's my little extravaganza of random clips I recorded using Blender's screencast feature, which, if you do wrong, it will take up a lot more space than it needs to. So, yeah, this is just going, and I'm just talking. That's pretty normal. So, there's nothing really to elaborate on at the moment. I am just making some fine edits. I've got quite a lot to do. You know, I keep using the word fine, but the edits are actually quite big, and there actually needs to be quite a lot of editing done by this point, especially to thicken out those arms. Like, it looks like he couldn't even lift, say, a dumb bar, or maybe a very light dumbbell. That's what I meant, a dumbbell. It couldn't lift a very heavy dumbbell, even for like his size. Now with that tail, on the other hand, yeah, I bet he could probably slap your frickin' head off with it, and like he could probably catch a bullet with his chest, but maybe he couldn't do much with his arms, I guess, unless he was gonna like hold you in place and like slap you a few times with his tail. So I don't think his tail's long enough to reach that far. I don't think it would be that flexible. So I guess I'm just gonna cut it with the attempt at sarcasm and just actually talk about something relevant. Remember to don't use the same size brush and same amount of strength, and that's more for the newer people who are newer to Blender. You might be like me, who in the beginning, or like the past couple of models before this one, who use pretty much the same strength for absolutely everything, like for every feature, and you don't want to do that because that just messes things up. You don't want to do that, bro. You don't want to do that. And remember to really vary up the size, because size does matter. Size definitely matters in this situation. And remember to pay attention to the... Oh god, that's horrifying. Oh god. Remember to pay attention to the proportions of your model when you're making these edits. I recommend opening, like splitting the window and having a camera focus on a specific angle, so you can see if there's any like major proportional edits. Like, holy crap, right now it is like I can't even see the sky outside right now. It's currently 6:47 p.m. in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am looking out of the window of this apartment, and I cannot even see the sky, and there's like lightning, and there's rain. It's kind of... And I've got the only lights I have right now, other than the lights from outside, are the lights from my two laptops I have on right now. I'm listening to music through one, and talking to my recorder, and watching my computer screen as the me in the past catches up to the me now who finished this model already. Yeah, that's actually kind of a clever move, but I just sit there using the inflate tool to add more. Oh god, that's scary. To add more, like I don't really add more. I just like I bring it up, and that might not... Oh my god. That might just I think if you've got to go that far, like in a facial area, you're probably already in trouble, and you should probably just go drastic with major edits. Like, eventually I pulled out the grab tool and pulled his head, like the top of his head, closer to his nose, and made his face small, like a normal otter, you know. I wouldn't even call this an otter. This is yeah, see, I'm doing it right now. This is kind of like a scary attempt, like, what are you doing? Oh my god, this is horrifying. It's not even Halloween yet and you're scaring me.
So let me catch you. So let me catch you slipping by. Why
Alright, so now we're getting into a different phase. I am creating bones. Bones for everything. One quick tip, one quick tip, create a bone for every single joint. If it bends, it needs a joint. The neck needs a joint, the head needs not a joint, geez, a bone. You want separate bones for each joint. You want a bone for the head, a bone for the neck, a bone for the upper body or the torso, and then you want a bone for the abdomens. You also want a bone for the shoulder. You get the general idea. If it's going to be a jointed area, you're going to need a bone because you've got like over 200 and something bones in your own body. Like, you've got enough bones to make up an entire skeleton, I would assume. Unless you've like... Anyway, we're not going to go into such graphic detail. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. One very important thing as you're creating all these bones, name every single one of them. You want to be able to identify every single one of these bones. Otherwise, you're going to have a really big mess of things that you do not want to be involved in. Like, you just want it to be so simple. Well, if you want it to be so simple, you need to act just as it's happening. You don't want to find yourself in that mess that I found myself in, in one of my practice attempts. I think you just don't want to find yourself in a mess, as I've said for like the third time now. Remember to rename every one of them. Even if the process is tedious, you will want to do that. You'll be saving yourself the headache when it comes to the rigging process. So just be sure to do that. And you need to name them for the rigging process, because you're going to have to know the names for each of the bones when it comes to the weight painting part. You don't need the names for the actual posing process. It's kind of like a domino, kind of like the domino theory. You name the bones so you can identify them and paint the influence of the weight around that bone when you select it in weight paint, and then you want to make sure your work is clean in the weight paint so you can pose it, and you want to make sure you have a fluid rigging system, so in case you're going to animate something, you can pose it without any problems. Hooray! Yeah. You totally want to remember that. Which is why it's important to pay attention to what you're doing and not be sleepy while you're doing this. I mean, if you really want to push yourself, make sure that you at least do it appropriately. Actually, I don't think that word works there. Just make sure if you're sleepy, you know what? Like, get you some rest. Take a break. If you're sleepy, you need to take a break. You need to wake up, because when you're sleepy, you feel like doing less work, and you might just end up going back and deleting what you did or restarting altogether. At least that's what I found myself doing. I know plenty of people who feel absolutely lazy when they sleep. Like, I know a lot of people who feel that way, and that's perfectly normal. Not shaming it. It's just a factor. And the same goes, I think I said this before, if you've been staring at the screen for like 5 hours straight, that's bad for you, and that's bad for your computer, unless you're working on a desktop, and desktops can stay on all day. Unlike a laptop, that is bad for the battery unless it can actually last that long. And I don't recommend plugging your laptop up to a charger. If your battery is low, put your laptop to sleep and charge it, because that is keeping it on charge while like if it's fully charged and you're just using the laptop with a battery, with the charger attached, and the battery is inside the machine, that's bad for the battery's health. If you are going to use the laptop with the charger, at least take the battery out, so that way the battery will be safe. In any other time with like older laptops, like you could risk fire, but I don't think laptops nowadays can get that hot. So like fire and explosion, like I don't think you have that to worry about in these times. Depending. Also, like another tip that I read about online is you it's good to have a decent temperature in your room, because remember, your computer generates heat, and if your room is already warm, then it's going to generate more heat. Heat is bad for the hardware. And believe it or not, if your computer's hardware is hot, that will actually make the computer run slower. That's why the computer overheats and shuts off to protect its components. But if you actually let it cool off and charge, give it a break, yeah, you will actually be doing good for your laptop. So I really recommend that. Please do that for the sake of your computer. And it's a perfect time to go take a break. Now, for a desktop, those things are built to last. So, assuming that you don't have a virus on there, and it's like killing your system from the inside, and you're trying to find somebody who could help you, and like, oh, I've got this little amount of time, and it's killing my desktop. Please help me. I can't help you. I'm sorry. I've got enough problems of my own. Like, anybody really cares. Anyway, just a couple little facts. Also, I just remembered, for the sculpting process, I'm sure for those of us who have a tablet, use a tablet. I haven't used my tablet recently for the posing process. Not the posing process, the sculpting process. I'm sure there are those of us who actually use the drawing tablet when we're sculpting, and that's perfectly fine. Blender even has settings for a drawing tablet. But I was talking to my friend one time about told her that I was going to use my tablet for the sculpting process, and she said you don't want to use a drawing tablet for the sculpting process. You want to use a 3D modeling mouse. And those sound great, and they look great, but their prices, as you would expect, are high. I'm using just a normal wireless gaming mouse to do everything, even the painting process for my models. I don't have any money to spend on like expensive tech like that. If I'm going to spend a lot of money on something, I'm gonna get myself a new computer first. That's what I'm gonna do. But if you have the money, then that's something you can look into, getting a 3D modeling mouse. I don't know much about them. I've seen some really sleek, high-tech looking modeling mouses, and then there are like simple ones with like I've only seen one. Like I only remember seeing one. I remember looking online at him, but that's not really important anyway. What's important is you get this done. Also, you might have just noticed that there was a little message that popped up, a loop in parents. That's because I had parented the one of the objects to the body before. And in case you don't know, the shortcut Control P is to add a parent, and Alt P is to remove a parent. And the options for there are little pop-up options, and depending on what order you move them in, what order you select them in, you'll get different options. So say that you select your your model and you have your skeleton system set up, and you select the skeleton, and first you select the model, then you select the skeleton, and you select Control P. You can set the parent for the skeleton to the model, and it will, depending on what you select, it will rig the model. And if you select parent with automatic weights, it automatically sets the weight for the model, so you'll be able to jump right into pose mode when you select the skeleton, and you'll be able to pose your model. But the only thing about automatic weight painting, the only thing about setting the weight paint to automatic, it's a one-time thing. It's not something that you can't edit. When you set the automatic weight paint, you have to go into well, you don't have to, but it's something I recommend, and others will too, that you go into weight paint and you adjust the paint, the influence of each bone, because it's not going to be perfect, but it's extremely useful for fingers. Like it practically perfectly weight paints the fingers, unless you want to do some fine tuning yourself, in which you can. Now to see the different bones as you're weight painting the model, you first have to go into object mode, then you have to select your model, and then you go into weight paint mode, and then you go into that tab for the vertex groups, and you should there'll be like a list of the different bones, which this is the part where identifying your bones is extremely useful, because it will actually have created a vertex group for each and every one of your bones. And if you select one of those vertex groups while in weight paint, you will see its influence on your model. And weight paint kind of like it exaggerates like in some areas, like the fingers, it's not going to exaggerate, it's going to be very accurate, but like the chest area and the shoulders, those are going to be a little bit exaggerated, and it's going to be easier to paint if you have your model subdivided, but your computer might run a little bit slower, so you're going to have to kind of work with it, because it'll have like it'll just be easier to touch the area, which is one thing you'll want to do is lower the strength of the brush to make it much easier for that very reason, which I will actually demonstrate in a little bit once I get to the process. Right now I am just making fine edits, I guess, or major edits. Oh, since I used the word fine way too much. Yeah, it looks like I'm just working on the parents. Oh, I'm creating a eyes control for the eyes, which is another thing that Darren Lyle has a tutorial on. If you haven't watched his tutorials by now, or the next video, I may just annoy you with the constant, oh, Darren Lyle has a tutorial on this, a tutorial on that. That's because Darren Lyle is an awesome guy who's a professional, and I'm not, so you should totally go watch the professional here. He made a game model for a game developer. Like, how much more professional could you get? Somebody actually come to you and ask you to create a model, or maybe he came to them. I don't know. I don't know Darren. I only know him by his videos. I don't know him anywhere else. I don't. Yeah, you see what I was talking about? The influence is really kind of exaggerated. when the jaw moved, the lips moved as well, and that's not something that you want because that's not accurate unless it's for the sake of expression. But if you really want to make a facial expression, you don't want to rig the lips with a bone. You want to do that with a shape key. And this is and one thing to be very careful with, your shape keys are kind of like modifier sensitive. And like what I mean by that, your subdivision modifiers, like you can't apply a modifier with a shape key active, is what I was trying to remember. So if you want to work like use a shape key on a high poly model, you're going to have to get rid of it. Though I don't recommend that, since depending on how high the poly count is, that's like a lot to work with. And you could just keep the subdivision surface or multi-resolution active. You don't need to ever remove them unless you just want to work with a high poly count. And since multi-resolution keeps that, actually, I'd like to rephrase myself, because I just remembered that if you're working on a high poly model and you want to create facial expressions, you're going to have to go into edit mode to create facial expressions, in which you're going to need to apply the modifier, which could actually be to your benefit, because with more polys, that just means more detail. And since there's a freaking lot of muscle in a creature's face, assuming that you're not a skeleton of a sort, or like a golem, or a rock. I'm trying to be funny, but like a creature with a lot of muscle in their face, that could actually work to your benefit, because on a low poly model it might look good, but the higher the detail, the better. Like, it's the subtle things when you're working in 3D art, it's the subtle things that people won't notice that are accurate unless they're looking for it. But if it is inaccurate or something moves unnaturally, they're going to notice. And like, that's the thing. You don't want them to you don't want them to like dissect it. You want them to enjoy it. You don't want them to like question why this is happening. You want to put the effort into making it look good. I'm assuming that you're like that. I mean, to me, that's the part of being a 3D artist. Like, you're okay with people dissecting, like, maybe not like taking the file and looking at it, because then they could ultimately pirate that unless you trust the person. But examine it from the footage. And like, you look at games today, like the models in a game, the way the poly count for models in games and models in movies, I would imagine they're quite different, because I was actually reading in this magazine once, the developers were I don't remember if it was a developer, but it was somebody from a game studio, and he mentions that in a game there's almost never a completely round object, and that's because a game can only handle so much. Like, Blender as its own application can handle a lot, but a game isn't. It's different. I'm not a game developer, but I've played a lot of games. I've played a lot of mainstream games like Call of Duty. In Call of Duty, I did a lot of examining. There are quite a lot of like flat surfaces, like surfaces you wouldn't normally examine, that are round. They actually have like a sort of like an octagon shape. Like, if you look at a guy's bald head, you will notice that it's not actually round, it's kind of square. And the hair is actually every like the texture of a backpack or gloves. Those are normally flat textures actually. It's just the perspective of the actual textures. And like most of the time, fingers in Call of Duty, I examined models in Modern Warfare 3. Their fingers aren't even perfect. Now, this isn't really so much of a problem, I guess, if you're not going to look at it, since fingers aren't. You're normally not examining fingers when you're trying to kill these other individuals, regardless if they're computers in survival or if you were playing multiplayer in the time that like Modern Warfare was filled with people. Like, you're not gonna really notice these things, and that's something you can kind of passively agree on. But artistically, that's kind of like skipping the detail. But like gamers, they didn't normally people who play Call of Duty, like, they're not playing it for the art. They're playing it simply to shoot and kill. Like, that's truly the higher majority of Call of Duty. And then you've got players who will actually look at the models like me, and they'll just examine the work that these people put into, and like, it's not even a lot. But then again, they create a lot of models. It's just not character models. It's buildings, it's vehicles, it's possibly animals. Like, even if you look at the attack dog from Call of Duty Black Ops 2, it actually has no fur. It's a texture. It's just a low poly model with textures to fool the perspective. And people aren't really like, what is, or no, it's not Black Ops 2, it's the first Black Ops. Like, there are a lot of dogs. If you earn the attack dog kill streak, and you gotta be really careful when you're using a lot of polygons in a game, otherwise it'll crash. So the dogs, like, they're low polys. The only thing is that the textures is what's really fools people. It's kind of like a deception, you know. The texture fools your perspective, because chances are you're not really paying much attention to the attack dogs artistically. Now, in Call of Duty Zombies, I'm using Call of Duty for example because I played a lot of Call of Duty when I was younger, like a freaking lot, and that's a game series that I did a lot of examining in. But in Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies, I played Kino der Toten a freaking lot, and still would if I cared to. The dogs in Kino der Toten, they actually have more work than the dogs than the German Shepherds do. And that's because you're not going to get like 20 freaking hellhounds in one stage. So they put more work into the facial features and the actual designing of the models. And each game, the details just get better because they create the game better, and they're able to run these polygons better. Also, I just realized that I was trying to create an eyes control ball for the model. I was actually kind of looking everywhere else at the time, but for this, I was actually following the eyes rigging from Darren Lyle's series, and I was messing up a lot. Like, I spent a long time, and the first problem was I added a track 2 I added a track 2 bone constraint to the bone when I should have added a track 2 constraint to the eyes. Because if you add a track 2 constraint to a bone, you're going to want that bone to track something. But if you add that to an object, you're going to want that to track something else. So that's like, I spent like 15 minutes or longer trying to figure out what that was, and I actually had to go to Darren Lyle's tutorial to remember what the problem was. And I actually ran into a couple problems, and I tried to solve it by kind of like doing my own thing, like, haha, I did this, and it's more efficient, when in reality it's not. I was being such an amateur, such a noob. The problem that I encountered in this situation was the eyes, they were moving on the wrong, they were tracking the bone on the wrong axis. And I was so hell-bent on trying to imitate Darren Lyle that I completely ignored the logic of the actual situation, and I actually set the first space to pose space, and that did work so much easier, but it didn't work perfectly. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get it to work perfectly, and it wasn't. So I spent like an hour trying to figure that out. And the problem was, even though I made the model like I actually made sure that the model was facing the correct axis, which is important when you're doing things. The tracking wasn't actually the perfect, you could say. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just wasn't. And the problem was the up axis was actually not Z, where in Darren Lyle's tutorial, the up axis was Z. And I just tried imitating that and working with different settings, hoping that it would work, and it didn't work with Z. But the up axis was actually, the up axis in my situation was actually Y. And you'll have to replace Y with Z in the like the little settings, like right there. I think I fixed it.